It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Irwin. Did you even hear that? I tried to do my best Marilyn Monroe given the topic of the day, but
that was a first. The breathy, whispery Esperanza Leon. That was very funny. It's Esperanza. It's almost as funny in a sense of what we're going to talk about. I mean, we're going back in time to a 1957 article. We love, again, this era, more like, I guess, our sweet spot can be 60s, 70s, 80s, but this one goes back to the late 1950s. And Esperanza, now we both read this article. It's from Sports Illustrated. For the life of me, I don't know.
What is the connection?
I know Sports Illustrated has done swimsuit issues with
Is it travel? I mean, is it? Haven't read Sports Illustrated in like 3 decades. So
me too. When I as a young boy, an adolescent, a teenager, I used to have a subscription to Sports Illustrated. I remember.
Yeah, that's probably how I would have read it through my brother, but I don't have any reason to have that magazine.
Because I would think their market was probably 13 to 16-year-old boys like me. But anyway, at the time.
Especially the swimsuit issue, right?
Exactly. But this is an issue that, well, why don't we just dive right into it? Because it's an article written by Horace Sutton. Full disclosure, I didn't Google who Horace Sutton was.
So he was a travel writer, basically, is my understanding.
Okay, so thank you for that.
Totally makes sense.
Okay, so he was a travel writer. But again, that part makes sense because this is sort of traveling through Eastern Long Island. That's basically what this is. Again, what it has to do with Sports Illustrated
is, your guess is as good as mine, but definitely he was, according to his obituary in the New York Times, the preeminent American travel writers, one of the preeminent American travel writers during the years of the greatest expansion of tourism.
Okay, wow.
Which is true, right? I mean, this is the era of Pan Am.
That's correct.
Right. I mean,
One Trip, and that's someone who had
in Pan Am. Yeah.
Had a presence in East Hampton.
This was like my father's era. So.
Right. Okay. So there is something here. We will also say the article was accompanied by some really great photography by a Tony Frisell, but it's basically by Horace Sutton. And I even love the name. I can't wait to put this on our Instagram at the time and on our website. The Fabulous Hamptons, a 1957 perspective. So
you could rewrite this and say The Fabulous Hamptons, a 2023 perspective,
and probably rewrite it a 1911 perspective, a 1987.
Every year.
So because apparently this place that we love so much has always been, in a word, fabulous.
Fabulous.
Okay, and according to Horace Sutton and to Esperanza's point, guy who wrote extensively about travel, he thought this place was fabulous. And Esperanza, his first sentence, I have to ask you to read because we need that amazing European accent you put on, how he called this a sort of corner Côte d'Azur.
Yes, a sort of corner Côte d'Azur.
Wow. Now that's the way to say that. Not Côte d'Azur, but thank you. Thank you for that, Esperanza. So that's what it was. And I got to tell you, he starts right from the first paragraph of this article. And he right away, the Hamptons begins at West Hampton Beach, 80 miles from Times Square, and runs from there for 35 miles in the general direction of Spain.
I love that.
That's so true. Portugal actually would be the first stop, but through Hampton Bays, Southampton, Bridgehampton, East Hampton, Amagansett, ending up in a fishtown hamlet called Promised Lane.
Promised Land. Yeah.
Promised Land, excuse me. And Esperanza, no mention of Montauk.
Well, yeah. I mean, it says 10 miles from the island's end.
Right.
Which Doesn't have a name.
which apparently didn't have a name. Yeah, exactly. And now this is something that's really uh, sort of has touched on so often when we've discussed this location. I'm going to go right with his words from the start, because I love the way he writes. Of these saltwater licked, tree shaded seaside cities, only West Hampton, Southampton, and East Hampton really figure. The others must be classed as suburbs and appendages.
Suburbs.
Yeah,
But what's interesting is that he's just named the towns, right? Like, I mean, Southampton and East Hampton comprise all those appendages that he's talking about. So, well, anyway.
But, Esperanza, first of all, classifying that, now this is 1957. In circa 2023, we have used the term suburbs. On prior episodes, we talked about, mid-Hamptons, how they were thinking of a suburbanization of Wainscott and whatnot. But now 1957, to classify any of these towns as suburbs is not all that accurate, to me anyway, especially the towns in between. And we've spoken about this extensively, Southampton, East Hampton being the bookends. The towns in between were really, even in 1957, farmland.
Yeah, very rural. Yeah,
very. Really, we don't. I can't imagine we could really call it suburbs.
Suburban, yeah.
Not really, but discussing the difference between these, and he's interviewing an old-time resident saying West Hampton, saying yes, that West Hampton was the friendliest, East Hampton the richest, Southampton the snobbiest.
That held true in the 70s, and I'm not sure today. I think East Hampton might be the snobbiest these days, but I think Southampton still might hold that cachet.
Yeah, well, again, knowing that this is from 1957, and as we go along, I think our audience will recognize Southampton is the heart of this article that he wrote. And just to mention also about the article, it is a long article. I mean, this was
pages and pages
and pages of this. Again, I could see it in Travel and Leisure, why it was in Sports Illustrated. But anyway, so Esperanza elaborated on her experience of calling it, of what it was. And who knows?
And I remember Southampton being the snobbiest. It was like the Palm Beach crowd, much more so than East Hampton ever was. Like, East Hampton had a quiet reserve. Southampton was always flashier.
And yeah, okay, we're going to go with that. And Esperanza, from a Southampton businessman, and this is something that has always sort of been out here, the sort of sneering at the 288 phone exchange, that West Hampton has. A Southampton business I'm not saying this, ladies and gentlemen, this is coming right from Horace Sutton's article, but a Southampton businessman born and bred put it this way: if for the sake of argument, the Duke of Windsor should come down here, he would undoubtedly visit East Hampton, but he would stay in Southampton and wouldn't stop in West Hampton at all.
Did we say that Southampton was snobby?
We certainly did, and so did Horace Sutton, and so did apparently this unnamed businessman, quote unquote, said that.
Maybe it was the businessman that owned the country's oldest department store.
It could very well maybe. Thank you for that. I mean, talking about Hildreth's obviously, but whatever the reason, was it going to offend present day being 1957 West Hampton Beach, described here as a lively community where the waves wash the night tarnished glitter of the celebrities pried loose from the cafes of Manhattan, houses built on stilts to protect them from the rambunctious sea, and the fire engines embossed with the legend Sons of the Beach.
Yes, which I love. You see them every year at the Southampton July 4th parade or any of the,
so 66 years later, that still holds true.
It still holds true. Yes.
That's terrific. So he started this article off in West Hampton, talking, he touched on the hurricane of 38, which all but wiped out West Hampton, amongst other places, killed 22 people. The community included the Krindlers, who ran the 21 Club, which was really in business only up until about a few years ago. Philip Leboudier, sounds like chairman of the board of Fifth Avenue's Best and Company. I love these two, P.G. Woodhouse and Arthur Treacher, which Arthur Treacher was a butler in film who became more known for lending his name to a seafood chain. But, that was, I remember that. I'm older than you. I remember Arthur Treacher's fish fry or whatever it was called. But, and he touches on the Dune Deck Hotel. I remember my sister actually used to stay in the Dune Deck for a lot of years, which was sort of like, as described here, a Lindy's by the sea, 54 rooms right on the ocean, and
it's so interesting because there's this cast of characters there of like a Broadway set, right? Like it's really very connected to that.
Exactly. And, Charles Adams, Charles Ruggles. Yeah, totally. And Charles Adams, you pointed this out before we were talking. His presence was more, I think, in Sagaponack. I think
they settled. Yeah, that's where the house still is to this day. It's kind of like a house museum. Yeah,
right. It was sort of the inspiration for the Adams family.
Well, what I mentioned to you, not his house, but there was a house in Sagaponack that belonged to a member of the Strong family. And that house, I mean, people have told me from that time of like through the 60s, that it was this scary looking house because she just left it all like ramshackle and abandoned. And trying to remember her name, I can't think of it. But anyway, that was apparently the inspiration for the Addams family house.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes,
that's a great clarification. Thank you for that. Now that's very helpful. Now, the Dune Deck was one thing, but apparently, according to Mr. Sutton, the most ambitious project, described as a pinked up hybrid extravaganza, was the West Hampton Bath and Tennis Club, which was neither private club nor public playground, but just
kind of a cross between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I love what he writes here. An example of what happens when someone lets decorator Dorothy Draper loose on the beach with a fat bankroll.
Well, his description of everything sort of being pink and I guess sort of pastel colored pink and purple and very, very glitzy for sure. But it reminded me so much of this place that's from this same era, I think, called Las Brisas in Acapulco, and everything there is pink, pink and white, pink and white, pink and white. So it just reminded me of that.
God, I love those accents you put into play here.
Las Brisas.
Oh man, we still may have to get a replay of Côte d'Azur, but we'll hold that. We'll hold that for later. But
my opening, my breathy opening.
The breathy opening. Yeah, I mean, our fans may be clamoring for that as time goes on, but we'll see how that goes. But there was a nautical nook there, the wheel room. I mean, like, just my gosh. And now in 1957, sold out, by the way, the beachfront cabanas at Bath and Tennis rented for $1,015 a season.
I'm guessing like Memorial Day to Labor Day?
I would assume that's what they were. The club apartments, peach walls, windows that offered a view of the pool. $375 a week for two, including breakfast and dinner. Sort of like this is like a Sea Spray Inn.
Yeah, maybe, I was thinking that exactly.
Which we had an episode about the Sea Spray Inn in East Hampton. This is a similar kind of setup. At midday, guests in bathing suits can contract for a hamburger on terms at a yellow and black cafeteria festooned with Scandinavian lanterns. So now, according to Mr. Sutton here, that was sort of the glitzier side. But apparently, Esperanza, there was the more old, staid kind of places, such as the West Hampton Country Club and the Quantic Beach Club. Now, I don't know anything about these two places. I've never heard of these two places. I know where Quantic Bay is. That's a area, bay within the community. But I guess these were more of the old school kind of things. Quantic washed out, according to the sea, in that 1938 hurricane and rebuilt.
Right. And it still exists.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And among its 135 families. Now, wow, look at now, $25 a season plus $40 for a bathhouse. Sounds like pretty much a deal compared to the price points over at the Bath and Tennis.
Right, right. Very democratic.
Yeah, total. I mean, a Judge Harold Medina, that we mentioned, Mr. Laboutier. I remember his son was a congressman, represented this district at one time, John Laboutier. And then there was a Charles Wilson of GE, and topless bathing suits, the acceptable dress for men. Strictly forbidden to bring intoxicated potions on the premises. Nursemaids who may, in the call of duty, venture near the water, may not bathe in the sea. I mean, I don't know what was going on here at the time, but
so funny. Well, very, very Puritan values at the Quantic, I presume.
I apparently, and now he goes a little bit further east down the line into Quag. It's funny, Esperanza, we really, in all fairness to our audience, we had an episode on Hampton Bays, and we've gone, we
formerly known as Good Ground.
Formerly known. So true. We really haven't given West Hampton Quag the play that it probably deserves.
Well, we will.
But we're doing it now. I mean, he talks about Quag, both a beach club and a field club down the line, with a small enclave of about 800. Summer souls of solid wealth and quiet taste, who live between the borders of, as he describes, jazzy West Hampton and fish happy Hampton Bays, or Good Ground.
Good.
And we had the novelist John O'Hara. We had the playwright Arthur Lawrence, the designer George Nelson, the editor Ted Patrick. These inhabitants of Quag, not particularly well known nor particularly social register, hemmed in by strict self-imposed zoning laws. Hey, Esperanza.
Yeah, that, I mean, this
Come
is
on.
like ding, 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 ding. When I read that.
It's funny. This didn't really resonate with me initially, but
what's funny is those zoning laws that prescribed a minimum house size, not the maximum.
Right. So
which I've seen this before, because they didn't want little shacks. They wanted, at minimum an 1,100 square foot house.
I mean, we don't know what those minimums were. It would be interesting to find out, but just to give you an example of what this Quag Field Club, as it was known as, was like, it was an always wear a tie. Now, look, this is 66 years later. I mean, no one really wears ties anymore. Not really, unless you're going to court. But always wear a tie, a cocktail party life, and tennis and golf. I mean, the pink and white pavilions had a weekly dance.
Pink was having a thing in the 50s, huh?
Apparently, but so that's where we're sort of leaving off. We leave west of the canal at this point. To go into really the heart of this article, which is Southampton, which is described as an ancient community of large old houses, large old matrons, large old trees, both botanical and family.
This guy, I mean, he writes in such a really, I love how he writes.
I remember a term in a prior, I think it was the Mid-Hamptons episode, where you know where I'm going to go now, where a lot was described as highfalutin.
Yeah.
Highfalutin. And that's sort of like, I think this Horace Sutton's writing style, you could say, is sort of highfalutin, but he describes behind these high green hedges the assortment of Dukes, DuPonts, Henry Ford II. We did a whole episode on Ford Dune, Dan Topping, and of course, Gary Cooper, an actor who visited his in-laws, the Paul Shieldses.
And who's buried who's buried in the cemetery there off
That's
County Road 39, by the way.
okay. There you go. And Southampton, that at this time, I mean, again, this sounds like an awful lot of money. In 1957, realizes about $8 million a year in property taxes. They talk about the DuPont estate, 40 rooms, assessed at about $175,000, reducing a tax bill, which at the time, $10,000. 1957, Esperanza must have been a lot of money. But Sutton describes these parties, how there's still money left over for these private parties given on the grounds under canvas of these big estates. These soirees would have a tent, a dance floor, a canopy in case of rain. Now, Esperanza, I know you have
the canopy that led from the road. That's the part that gets me. In case of rain, we have a whole canopy leading to the tented area where the dancing and the dining will take place.
I mean, I guess, it's speculation, but I guess sort of like, what is this? Like anything goes, because these people were contributing so much to the tax base that, they were letting these canopies going from roads. And remember, these were long driveways, large parcels of land.
Yeah.
But Esperanza, now I know you're a night owl. You mentioned on prior episodes how you've actually seen the sunrise, that wild lifestyle.
And not because I'm getting up at dawn.
Exactly. But first invited to arrive at 11 o'clock in the evening. At this point, I'm sleeping for 90 minutes, but okay. Importing chefs from New York to wrestle up scrambled eggs, corned beef hash, sausage, pancakes. It was a New York caterer he brings out here, Robert Whiteblower, to handle the summer rush. A summer party will cost about $6 a person for food, but that's only the beginning. Doesn't count the tents, the music, the liquor, the parking attendants, and yes, the private police. And this small supper for 500 could break up at 5, 6, or 7 in the morning.
Yeah, come for dinner, stay for breakfast. People knew how to party, and by the way, like, this does not happen anymore this way.
I'm so glad you said that, because this is another repeating theme of our Hamptons, Esperanza. When we go back to the episode that we did about the watering holes of Eastern Long Island, if you recall, they were partying at Jungle Pete's and Springs far more in the 40s than they were doing in 2020's Eastern Long Island.
Totally,
no question about it. No question about it. The partying was just way bigger. Or at the proprietor of Club Swam's house, where, if we recall that episode, where they went to his house afterwards and they were diving off the diving board, diving from his house into the pool.
Yeah.
At the time in Wainscott in circa 1970s. But
wild times.
Far more, man. Esperanza. No wild times like that now.
It's different.
Really,
I can't really explain it, but I think we're all in agreement that it's a different kind of partying these days. People are going for IVs at Gurney's, that for wellness. It's really people used to go to Gurney's to party.
In recent memory, Esperanza, have you been invited to a party that started at 11 where you stayed till 5 or 6? I don't think these things are going on all that frequently now. But now he starts mentioning places that are near and dear to our hearts and very familiar to us for entertainment in public view. Southampton went to Herb McCarthy's Bowdoin Square. Now, is Bowdoin Square still there, Esperanza?
Yeah. No, that's exactly where for many years the public house ran out of Herb McCarthy's Bowdoin Square, and then now it's Union Cantina, I think.
Okay, so there is still a physical space there,
and Bowdoin Square is the street, right?
Is the street, right? Yeah. Right. And the kitchen dispensed, great food: Montauk lobster, Long Island duck, etc. Probably potatoes with Bridgehampton loam. Got to touch on that. Who's kidding who?
Yes.
And was attended by a Herb McCarthy, always in a starched white coat. Don't say that often anymore, Esperanza.
So my
God.
Yeah.
Steak sizzling over an open broiler up the street at the post house. Now, some of the best steaks slightly down the road. I don't remember this place. Do you ever recall the Trade Winds in Watermill?
No, I'm wondering if it's that place that's been a series of restaurants over the years, which has low ceilings and is like a little house that's on the south side in
And right,
Watermill.
its last incarnation was, I believe, Roberts,
Exactly. I'm
owned by
wondering if that's it, but I'm
Robert
not
Durkin, I
sure.
believe. Yeah, who was a great chef out here. But we got to just digress. But while we're in Southampton, to discuss this hotel, the Irving House, which was a sprawling, and I say was no longer with us, but just to bring you into this, a sprawling vintage hostel that has been sheltering Hamptons visitors for 80 years.
Hmm.
I mean, listen to who was sampling the steam table in late 1950s was Senator at the time, John F. Kennedy, Peter Lawford, who was an actor, and I think his cousin also, if I'm not mistaken, there was a relation there.
Hmm.
Gene Tierney, Cordelia Drexel, Biddle Robertson. Right on First Neck Lane off Hill Street was where the Irving House was. 156 rooms, 5 buildings, Esperanza, 37 acres.
Incredible.
I mean, are you kidding me here? You know, and the rooms at that time rented for $15 a night, breakfast included. Now, this was not oceanfront. This was inland, so to say. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
close
it
to
was
the
just a
ocean.
block,
Yeah,
yeah,
a couple of
blocks
blocks,
away. Yeah,
but not. We don't want to compare it to Bath and Tennis or
right.
um
Not
or
not salt licked.
not Salt Lick exactly. Yeah, not Salt Lick, not the Sea Spray Inn,
No, but
but
at the very entrance, really, I mean, think about it. This is how people would come in to Southampton, really, was Hill Street, because that was Old Montauk Highway.
that's
They would
right,
take this road into
right, because
Southampton.
there was really no County Road 30. I mean, I don't know.
Exactly.
I
Well,
don't think
I don't know what that was. I think it
right.
was probably farmland, but definitely Hill Street was, I think, the entrance to Southampton. It still
Yeah,
can be, but it's no
that's
longer.
correct. And if you're if you're going through West Hampton, West Hampton and Hampton Bays, that is the way you would probably go. But now the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough went to the Irving that summer in a snug apartment with a private entrance, 3 beds, 3 baths, $553 a week, including meals.
That's a
Not it.
snug apartment, three
Yeah,
beds, three
right.
baths.
So like that, like the code for real estate ads, cozy. You know, and but this Irving hotel operated with a staff of 82 people. For 14 mates. I mean, this was someplace. And you gotta love this, Esperanza. This is one of my favorite part of the article. Now the stepson of Irving Terry, William Fordham, inherited his father's modest 12 room boarding house in 1910, and eventually turned it into this 100-room hotel. Now we're talking. This is a 1974 article. We're just going to deviate, divert ourselves for a minute about the demolition of the Irving, but I got to bring out some of these points about it. One former employee recalled not too fondly. I'm not even sure what this means, except I'm getting it from what it says. A kind of vassal master relationship between the staff and the guests. And it barred the staff, for instance, from using the Bathing Corporation beach during the 11 a.m. swimming session. And Esperanza, apparently this came, that expression, of fish rots from the head down. I mean, apparently this came right from the top, because the Terrys, as this former guest remembered, and this is a quote, the Terrys were terrible snobs themselves. Now, these are the innkeepers. They just didn't let everyone in, practically demanded a pedigree.
Well, got to keep the riffraff out.
I
And it
mean,
seems to me like the servants were treated as, like basically you didn't want to see them. They had to do their jobs without being while being invisible.
That's exactly correct. And you know, now he morphs into Southampton more so. And Esperanza, maybe this is where we're going to start to get into a little bit of the sports, because I still, to this point, we have not made a connection as to why this is in Sports Illustrated. Now he's talking about the Southampton Bathing Corporation that, strangely, as he puts it, mixes business with pleasure.
In the name, yes.
Yeah, right. You know, the Bathing Corporation. I mean, I always loved that, you know, and it's, we know where this is. This is really on the ocean. And
oh, it's such a beautiful
oh my
spot
God,
next to St. Andrew's Church there on
that
the dune, right?
we can call a lot of places out on Eastern Long Island as good as it gets. This really
This is
as good
definitely
as
one of them.
this
Yeah.
is certainly one of them, you know, and again, sort of even then, the clubhouse, which probably hasn't changed much, was described as aging, built in the Spanish hacienda style, perfected by the, you know, Misner in Palm Beach, you know, 400 carefully screened families. I guess I wouldn't have made the cut here, Esperanza. You probably would have. They shared 400 feet of beach with nannies in white dresses, floppy straw hats, the young guard in madras, dirty tennis shoes, no socks. The old guard surveying it all under a panoply. And here we go again, of pink parasols.
Pink was it.
Pink was the thing, Esperanza.
Mm-hmm.
He now touches on the Meadow Club, founded in 1887. State of J. Bowers Lee. There were tournaments there, 3 won by Bill Tilden, 4 by Bobby Riggs. These are familiar names. Pancho Segura, you know, ultimately became a circuit with a couple of other clubs in Philly and New Jersey. Southampton, Esperanza, according to Mr. Sutton, large houses, large parties, large cars, large selection of debutante daughters.
There's a lot of largesse.
A lot of large, and apparently, Esperanza, too many borrowed cars were smashed, too many wine cellars tapped, and alas, too many housemaids compromised.
Oh dear.
Ouch. Anyway, continuing with, and Esperanza, I got to give you props because you said this really in the first minute of this podcast. You know, he now starts to talk about the national golf links nestling in the Shinnecock Hills, which a national magazine once called America's snootiest. You know, 19. I guess this is. I'm saying I'm talking out loud now, Esperanza. Maybe here's the sports connections, but 1928. Professional players not permitted in the clubhouse and restaurant. The pros were not permitted in the clubhouse and restaurant, but were allowed to shower in the lockers. Experience both traumatic and memorable that members in 1957, 30 years later, instead of talking about an event in 28, still talking about. Now,
yeah, I mean, it's not like the Shinnecock, which has had, you know, the what do you call it?
The U.S. Open. The U.S.
Thank
Open.
you.
Right. The U.S. Open was there, you know. And,
yeah, many more than once.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's the oldest incorporated golf club in the country, right? So you would think that would be the snootiest, but National Golf Links is actually, it is such a beautiful golf course, and it has the windmill. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, and we've
beautifully situated.
And
so
we've discussed it on prior episodes. I think when we talked about Bayberry Land,
exactly.
You know, but I like this. The National is a golf links for men, and now again, this is 1957. Let me see if I could put on my Southampton voice to describe to you, Esperanza Leon, how the males dined in a long glass enclosed loggia looking out to a soft view of Peconic Bay, while the women dined in their own viewless salon in the front of the building, and on the weekends and holidays could play the course before 9:30 and after 3.
Equality at its best.
Or Equality 1957 style, but
Yeah. But look at the cast of characters for
oh
the
my gosh.
national, I mean, this is Henry Ford, Dan Topping. We've mentioned Juan Trippe
That's
from
right.
Pan Am, in an old tennis cap, no less. Gary Cooper, and then Andrew Biddle Duke, another Biddle. I mean,
Right.
these were the
Exactly.
Mayflower,
Completely.
descendants.
Henry DuPont, Bill Paley of CBS, the Vanderbilts. I mean, so this is what was going on. And to give you more and touching on the equality of its day, when they were having lunch, cracking into Old Lobsters with mustard sauce, a conversation arose about the greatest catastrophe that ever struck this nation. And some would mention the worst. We're not a political podcast, but it has to be said how the worst disaster that ever struck the nation was the New Deal. And around this table of men cracking lobster claws with mustard sauce, there was a murmur of amen.
Right. The Billionaire Boys Club.
I mean, you just gotta love this, oh God. Anyway, there were 13 miles separating Southampton from East Hampton, described as a road bordered with corn stands, clam settlers, potato fields. And I think we're going to close on this. I don't know if we're going to actually get to East Hampton here, Esperanza, but we do have to close on Out of This World. We mentioned this in a prior episode, and just to give you the difference, Saturday night cocktail parties with a Saturday night chuck wagon for $6.50. The rest of the week may have a menu where dinners ran from $4.75 to $8.75 for steak that you broil yourself.
Now, we mentioned it, Out of This World, you said this was when we were talking about Club Swamp, was in Wainscot.
That's right.
Out of This World. But what I love about this, and just because I have to say this before we close off, is the decorating motif that Mr. Sutton describes, which includes at some juncture or other pink brick,
right?
Pink, Grecian heads, Japanese flags, and fishnet. So he says the decorating motif is probably early Martian. It's out of this world. I mean, it's so good.
I guess that's what they were going for. But so we gave you a little piece. He does write a little bit about East Hampton. We're gonna, Esperanza, I think we're gonna have to say it's not much. We're gonna have to save that for another day. But again, it just gives you an idea. I mean, this travel writer, basically, for him, while he did touch on East Hampton, Southampton was the heart of
was it right? Yeah,
at the time. So East Hampton, sorry for giving you a little short shrift. It'll have to wait for another day. But Esperanza, that was a pretty cool journey.
It was. Thank you, Mr. Sutton, for taking us on that in 1957.
Exactly right. In a Hamptons, as he actually put it in here, life among the crustiest. And in addition to potentially being called snooty, Esperanza, I guess Mr. Sutton's view was Southampton at the time was also somewhat crusty.
I would agree. Yeah.
And on that note, that was until next time.
Okay.
No, I would give you a breathy response, but I would probably lose our audience completely by doing so.
So I'm just going. I don't think that was very sensual either. I mean, we didn't get to East Hampton, but this was the era of Marilyn Monroe, so I was doing my best.
We will get to East Hampton in a prior abbreviated podcast, but we don't want to fit it in now. Esperanza, thanks a ton.
All right, thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.